at 6:47 in the morning. On a Tuesday that nobody in that building would ever forget, Franklin Daws was flat on his back in a crawl space that smelled like rodent droppings and 2 decades of other people's bad decisions. He had a voltmeter in one hand, a mag-light clenched between his teeth, and he was troubleshooting why the CEO's $18,000 climate control system was screaming like a jet engine pointed straight to hell. Some consultant back in 2019 had wired the whole thing into the same electrical panel as the server room. Nobody checked the amperage load. Nobody ever checks anything. That's why they had Franklin. He remembered every wire in that building, every breaker, every shortcut some contractor took when they expanded the East Wing back in 2015. 22 years of keeping that building alive lived somewhere between his temples and his fingertips, and not a single page was written down anywhere except in him. He had no idea, lying there in that crawl space, that he had less than 3 hours before HR would call him into a glass conference room and hand him a folder with his name spelled wrong. Funny thing about redundancy, it's one of those words that sounds like it means something polite, like you're a backup system, a safety net. But what they don't mention is that you only remember why the backup system exists when everything else fails. And by then, it's usually too late to be grateful. My name is Franklin Daws. Frank to anyone who'd ever handed me a cup of coffee or held a flashlight for me in a tight spot, which used to be just about everyone in that building. I'm 56 years old. And for 22 years, I was the chief building engineer at a tech company that started above a dry cleaner with 4 employees, 1 borrowed conference table, and dreams so big they barely fit through the door. By the time they let me go, they had 230 employees, standing desks that cost more than my truck, and a CEO named Philip Wentworth who thought HVAC was a cryptocurrency. That last morning started exactly like every other morning for more than 2 decades. I unlocked the front door at 6:47, 23 minutes before anyone else. Same as always, I used the original brass key from 2001, the one they gave me when the company was still above that dry cleaner and couldn't afford to hire a proper custodian. I kept on a steel ring with 15 others, everyone labeled in my handwriting. Everyone a little piece of the building's history that existed nowhere else in the world except on that ring and inside my head. The cleaning crew had left someone's takeout in the sink again. Someone from sales had abandoned half a burrito in the mini fridge since Thursday. There was a leak under the second-floor bathroom that facilities had submitted a work order for in March. It was now August. I fixed it at 7 in the morning because that is what you do when you believe in a place. Some people who worked in that building call me the superintendent. Some call me maintenance. My business card said chief building engineer. But Philip Wentworth once asked me if I could look at his laptop because it was running slow. I told him that was outside my scope. He looked at me like I'd spoken in a foreign language. My inbox had over 5,000 unread work orders. I handled every single one. Not because I had to, because that was the job. Because the job is the job whether or not anyone is watching. It got worse when they brought in Cassandra Holt as the new director of people and culture. She was 29 years old, talked about psychological safety like it was a yoga pose, and once asked me what a circuit breaker did. I told her it broke circuits. She nodded like that was surprisingly helpful. She wore blazers she'd bought with venture money and smiled the way people smile when they're already planning to disappoint you. I never went to business school, never owned a suit worth more than a few $100s. But I knew that building the way a ship captain knows a vessel, which pipes groan before a cold snap, which HVAC unit started rattling when humidity crossed 65%, where the main electrical panel made a low hum like a warning 2 minutes before it tripped. I kept that company breathing through 4 pipe bursts, 2 server room floods, 1 actual fire in the copy room that I contained with a handheld extinguisher while everyone else was still screaming, and 4 different CEOs worth of decisions that would have made an engineer cry. And they just forgot. No plaques, no bonuses. No one ever learned my name correctly after the 3rd year. Once, after I stayed until midnight to restore power during an ice storm that would have cost them over $250,000 in lost server data, the old VP of operations handed me a granola bar and said, "You're a lifesaver, Frank." I told him my name was Franklin. He said, absolutely, man, and walked away. After a while, you stop correcting people. You just keep working. Because that's what you were taught. Because your father handed you a toolbox when you were 19 and said, you do the work right or you don't do it at all. My father's toolbox was a 1958 Craftsman. Dented. Heavy. Organized exactly the way he left it. Because I never had a reason to change what worked. I kept it in my truck. That toolbox was worth more to me than any performance review I'd never received. Now, here's the part of the story that most people don't know. The part that even I had stopped thinking about. Because I'd carried it for so long it became invisible. Back in 2001, when the company was brand new and barely had a pulse, the founder, a man named Douglas Crane, sat across from me at a booth in a diner and explained the situation. They needed to lease space downtown. No landlord would take them seriously. No bank would co-sign. No one believed in them enough to put their name on a legal document. Douglas looked at me across that laminated table and said, Frank, if we can't secure this space, we're done before we started. We'll be running a company out of my living room. And my wife has specifically told me that is not going to happen. I didn't co-sign the lease. I signed the whole thing. Put it entirely in my name. Used my credit, my history, my word. Douglas said it was temporary. Said he'd transfer it to the company as soon as they stabilized and got a business credit line established. We both meant to follow up on that. Life moved fast. The company grew. The lease just kept renewing. And because I was the one who handled the property manager, handled the paperwork, handled everything from the carpet replacement to the weird smell in Suite C that turned out to be a dead pigeon in the ventilation, it was always me on the line with the landlord. My name on every amendment. My signature on every renewal. 22 years later, nobody thought to check who actually held the lease. Why would they? That's what they had Franklin for. The eviction notice came on a Monday morning before the all-staff email. That email, which used the phrase strategic realignment opportunities, which is corporate for the floor, is about to drop out from under you, hit my inbox at 4:47 p.m. My gut already knew. I'd seen enough executive-level panic attacks and hushed hallway conversations to read the signs. I was next. The meeting invite came the following morning. Subject line, quick sync with HR. No context. No warm-up. Just a calendar event dropped into my afternoon, like a stone into still water. I showed up in my work shirt, the one with the company logo I'd been wearing since 2005. My boots, polished the way my father taught me, because you show up like you mean it even when it's ending. Cassandra from People and Culture was already seated in conference room A, smiling the way people smile when they've been coached on how to deliver bad news without getting sued. Next to her was someone from legal I'd never seen before. Nice shoes, very expensive folder. He kept his hands on it the whole time, like he was afraid I might take it. Franklin, Cassandra began, we want to have a restructuring conversation. She said restructuring the way a doctor says it's not good news. Deliberate. Practiced. I waited. We're evolving our operational model. She continued. Streamlining facilities management through a third-party vendor partnership. I looked at the legal guy. He looked at his folder. She slid the severance package across the table. 3 months' pay. NDA. Health coverage until end of quarter. The letter had a typo in my last name. 22 years, and they'd gotten it wrong. We're going to need your badge and keys today. The lawyer added, monotone as a smoke detector test, along with any company property currently in your possession. I took a breath. Slow. Deliberate. Then I reached into my bag. I set the badge on the table. Like a chess piece, I was done playing. Then the keys. All 15 of them. Labeled in my handwriting from 2002, back when I'd rekeyed the entire build of myself after the old lock system got compromised by a disgruntled contractor. I held up the ring and looked at Cassandra. You sure about this? I asked. She blinked. I'm sorry? The keys. You sure you want these back today? Last chance to think it through. She gave me the face. Compassionate. Rehearsed. It's not personal, Franklin. I stood up, buttoned my shirt. You just let go of the only person in this building who knows where the emergency gas shutoff is. Good luck finding a vendor who knows that on day one. I walked out before I said the other 17 things, sitting on the tip of my tongue. The sun hit the sidewalk like it had no idea anything had just happened. People moved past with coffee cups and headphones. Nobody knew they were walking beside a man who just watched 22 years get folded into a manila envelope. I didn't drive home. I pulled into the parking lot of a hardware store, killed the engine, and sat. Then I called Marcus Webb. Marcus had grown up 2 houses down from me, mowing lawns and asking questions about everything. Smart kid. Now, he was a real estate attorney with a reputation for being the calmest person in the room when everything else was burning. He picked up on the second ring. "Frank, you okay?" "No," I said, "but I'm about to be. You remember that lease we went over last year? The original one from 2001? A pause, then a low breath that said everything. "Yeah, that lease." They just handed me a box and asked for my keys. He was quiet for a moment. "Then do they know?" I looked out the windshield at nothing in particular. They just fired the leaseholder. So I think it's time we had a conversation with the property manager. That evening, I spread the lease across my workbench. 22 years old, coffee stained at the corner, held together with 2 staples and institutional memory. I kept in my father's toolbox, top drawer, right behind the socket wrenches. Where important things live. Page 14. Section 9C. Renewal of lease term shall require written notice from lessee no later than 30 days prior to expiration date. I checked the calendar. Expiration, August 1st. Today, August 4th. 3 days late. No written notice had been sent. No email. No certified letter. No phone call to Thomas Ruiz, the property manager I've been dealing with directly for 15 years. They were so consumed with their IPO roadshow and their rebranding initiative and their strategic realignment that nobody had thought to renew the lease on the building that housed the entire operation. They'd fired the only person who would have caught it, the only person who handled it, the only person who had, for 2 decades, been the invisible thread holding every operational detail together. I cracked open a beer, sat in my garage chair, thought about my father and his toolbox and what he used to say. You do good work because that's who you are, not because of who's watching. Then I pulled out my phone and started checking. The insurance policy on the building, still in my name. The HVAC service contract, renewed last spring under my personal email. The cleaning service, showed up every Tuesday because I direct deposited payment to the supervisor each month. The utilities, routed through a business account I'd opened with the city back in 2004, when the power used to blow every time someone ran the microwave and the color printer simultaneously. Every essential thread still ran through me. I was the infrastructure, and they'd asked me to leave. The old me, the one who still believed loyalty was a contract honored by both sides, would have sent an email, something polite. "Hey, heads up, there's a lease situation you might want to look at." That's what 22 years of quiet competence trained me to do. Step in, fix the problem, make it smooth. But that version of me had just been handed a folder with his name spelled wrong. So I closed the lease, finished the beer, and made a phone call to Thomas Ruiz. Thomas had been the property manager on that building for 11 years. He knew me, trusted me. When I walked into his office the next morning in my good boots, the ones that made a solid sound on tile floors, he looked up from his monitor with genuine surprise. "Franklin, didn't expect to see you. Just here to clarify a few things about the lease status," I said, and I set the folder on his desk. Original agreement, 7 amendments, every renewal document, all of it organized and tabbed, the way I organized everything. "I need to confirm," I said. There was no written renewal notice submitted by August 1st. Nothing from the company. He pulled up his system, scrolled, shook his head. Nothing logged. I assumed they were going month to month while they figured out the next term. Under Section 9C, I said, that converts automatically to month tenancy, which means either party can terminate with 30 days written notice. He leaned back. His chair gave a long creak. "Technically, yes, that's correct." I reached into the folder and produced a second document, formal letterhead, my attorney's signature at the bottom. I'd like to submit formal notice of lease termination, effective 30 days from today. He stared at it, then at me. You're terminating the lease. As a lessee of record, yes. I've already identified a replacement tenant. They're prepared to sign at market rate, which, for this location, is approximately 3 times what the current occupant has been paying since 2009. He ran a hand over his face. This is going to be complicated. I stood up, pulled on my jacket. What's complicated, Thomas, is staying silent for 22 years while people treat you like furniture. This part is actually pretty simple. The replacement tenant was a woman named Simone Park. I'd met her at a neighborhood association meeting about 8 months prior. She ran a wellness professional development company called Clearwater & Company, fully funded, expanding aggressively, and desperate for a downtown location with infrastructure already in place. She'd given me her card. I'd kept it in my father's toolbox. She wired the first 2 months' deposit within 48 hours of my call. The eviction notice was filed through the county portal on a Thursday. I paid for expedited processing. The confirmation email arrived with a sound that I can only describe as deeply satisfying. 2 mornings later, Cassandra from People and Culture sent me an email. Dear Franklin, hope you're settling in well. We're reaching out to confirm all company property has been returned. Please respond to confirm. Best, Cassandra. I clicked reply all, because Cassandra had CC'd half the leadership team to cover herself. Confirmed, I wrote, including the items you forgot you'd given me. Sent. I didn't sleep well the next 2 nights. Not from guilt, from memory. I kept thinking about Douglas Crane, about that diner booth in 2001, about the stack of rejection letters he'd shown me from landlords who wouldn't return his calls, about how much he meant it when he said they were a team. Douglas had left the company in 2017. Health reasons. He'd been replaced by Philip Wentworth, who'd been replaced by the current Philip Wentworth. Different Philip, same energy. The company had grown and shed its skin so many times that almost nothing remained of what it had been. Just a logo and a lease. I thought about my father, about what he actually meant when he said you do good work, because that's who you are. I think he meant the integrity of the work is yours. Nobody can take it. But that's different from letting people take you. 22 years of taking me, of borrowing my name and my credit and my knowledge and my nights and my muscle and my silence and calling it loyalty. There's a version of loyalty that's really just exploitation, wearing a comfortable face. I'd been living inside it so long I'd stopped feeling the walls. I owed it to myself to feel them now. The guilt disappeared. Sleep came easy after that. The certified letter landed at the company's front desk on a Monday morning at 9:11 a.m. Heavy envelope. County court seal. Plaintiff, Franklin Daws. Subject, notice of termination and demand to vacate premises. The receptionist that week was a temp named someone with a glitter pen name tag. She filed it in the recycling bin between a pizza coupon and an expired vendor catalog. Nobody found it for 4 days. By the time Philip Wentworth was standing in the lobby on Friday morning holding a laminated copy of the eviction notice that the property manager had taped to the front door, he'd already missed 3 phone calls from Thomas Ruiz and 1 certified mail delivery he'd never signed for. He called me at 7:51 that evening. I was organizing socket wrenches by size, which is a deeply peaceful activity that I recommend to anyone processing a life transition. I let it ring 3 times. Picked up on the 4th. Daws speaking. What the hell is going on? His voice had that quality of a man who had never, in his professional life, encountered a consequence he couldn't reroute. You evicted us. You can't evict a company you used to work for. That's insane. Do you have any idea what this does to our timeline? The board is... Philip. I said his name calmly, like a mechanic explaining something for the 3rd time. You fired the person who signed your lease, who held your insurance, who ran your service contracts, who kept the lights on and the pipes sealed and the servers cool for 22 years. You didn't ask who that was. You assumed it would just keep running. Silence. I'm not evicting you out of anger, I continued. I'm evicting you because that is the correct legal outcome of the decisions you made. You can be angry at me or you can read the paperwork. Both will lead you to the same place. He tried a few more things. Threaten legal action. Mention investors. Invoke the board. None of it landed anywhere. I'm not interested in a negotiation, Philip. Simone Park has already transferred 2 months' deposit. The space has a new future. I hope yours does too. I hung up and finished organizing the socket wrenches. The following Monday, they were moving out. Herman Miller chairs stacked in the lobby. Monitors wrapped in moving blankets. Someone had taped a piece of paper to a rental truck that said strategic relocation in 48-point font, which I respected for commitment to face saving. Philip, I was told by Walt Kozlowski, one of the facility's guys who'd been there almost as long as I had, threw a folding chair against the side of the truck when the freight elevator got jammed. Someone filmed it on their phone. It was on 4 tech blogs by noon. I drove by that afternoon, not to witness the chaos, just to see it finished. The building stood quiet, cleared out, light coming through the lobby glass at a low afternoon angle, hitting the floors I'd mopped and the pipes I'd maintained and the electrical panels I'd organized and reorganized and fought for over 2 decades. Simone Park was inside with 2 of her team, measuring for their build-out. She waved when she saw my truck. I rolled down the window. All yours, I said. She walked closer. You built something solid here. Franklin will take care of it. I nodded. You don't need to honor it for me. Just take care of it because it deserves to be taken care of. That's reason enough. She smiled like she understood. I drove home the long way, past the diner where Douglas Crane and I had shared a booth in 2001, and figured out how to build something out of nothing. It's a smoothie place now, but the booth is probably still there. Same bolts, same floor, just a different dream happening above it. Everything changes, except the lesson you eventually learn. Loyalty without reciprocity is just unpaid labor with a friendly face. Walt called me 2 days after the move-out, said he'd tendered his resignation, said he couldn't work for people who would discard 22 years of a man's knowledge and call it restructuring. What are you going to do now? He asked. I looked at my father's toolbox, at the wall of my garage where I'd mounted a small brass hook the night before, where the original building key from 2001 now hung, not as a memorial, but as a receipt, proof of what I'd built and what I'd been owed. Same thing I've always done, I said. The work, just for people who know what it's worth. 3 months later, I was consulting for 5 downtown properties, making nearly double my previous salary, setting my hours. Every contract signed with my name spelled correctly, because I now wrote the contracts. Walt joined me 6 weeks after that. Turned out he knew a lot about load-bearing walls, too. Here's what I want you to take from this story, because there's a lesson here that goes beyond the satisfaction of watching a folding chair bounce off a rental truck. There are people in your life, maybe in your workplace, maybe in your family, maybe in your community, who are load-bearing walls. They don't make noise. They don't submit reports about how much structural support they're providing. They just hold everything up quietly, consistently, because that's what they believe in, because someone taught them that good work is its own reward. And sometimes it is. But good work without recognition, without reciprocity, without even basic acknowledgement, becomes something else over time. It becomes an expectation. It becomes invisible. It becomes a resource people draw on without ever thinking about what it costs to provide it. Franklin Daws wasn't bitter. He wasn't vindictive. He was someone who finally, after 2 decades, stopped absorbing the cost of other people's inattention and let them experience it directly. Let the wall come down, so they could understand what it had been holding up. The most dangerous employee in any organization isn't the one who makes the most noise. It's the quiet one who knows where everything is, who remembers every decision, who holds the institutional knowledge in their hands and their muscle memory and their name on a 22-year-old piece of paper in the top drawer of a 1958 toolbox. That person, when they leave, takes something irreplaceable with them. The question worth sitting with tonight is this: are you that person for someone else? And if you are, do they know it? Do you know it? Because competence is never obsolete. It just sometimes needs to find better clients.